Remember the Bakugan video game? The first one, just titled Bakugan Battle Brawlers. The last video I uploaded, I tried to explain the rules of the Bakugan anime to the best of my ability. There were some things I left out, but overall, I was pretty proud of it, even though it was pretty difficult to try to make sense of everything they did in the show. And a YouTube comment popped up, basically expressing their thoughts that it's kind of surprising that Bakugan was able to pick itself off of the floor when they made understanding the rules so difficult. And then it dawned on me, what's the best way to experience the game of Bakugan and the show? And while it does seem crazy, I think the best way to understand the rules is to simply play the original Bakugan video, as they use the rules from the real world in the show to some extent. There is an extra rule that was never used in the show that I had in the last video's original script, but I took it out because I didn't really think it was relevant, but now I'm going to have to bring it up here. But we'll get to there when we get there. I remember back in the day when I first heard about this game, we were already in New Vestroya, and I randomly found out that we had a Bakugan video game on the PS2. Also, I don't have any footage, so we're just gonna have to make do with whatever I throw together. I'm sorry, I'm a bad YouTuber. Anyway, me and my brother were really excited, and at the time, the only anime games we played were the Dragon Ball Z Budokai and Taiki Kaiji series, and the Ultimate Ninja series that was on the PS2 for Naruto. So I figured it was just gonna be a retelling of the show, which I would have absolutely loved, and they have pretty much all of the important characters playable except for Webmaster Joe. But instead, they go for a different route. We have a custom character, and we even get our own Bakugan in the form of Leonidas. All things considered, the original story is pretty straight to the point, and the custom character is, well, the main character, who I will now be referring to as Kid, because besides Leonidas' partner, that's honestly what everyone calls him, so I'm just going to pretend that's his canon name. So the game starts off with Kid being picked on because he's terrible at Bakugan by the fat kid. Then Dan shows up and gives us the rundown on how to play the game, and we end up beating him. I just want to add that this isn't only a good way to explain how to play the rules for those who are a little confused, it's also good characterization, so Dan can form a bond with the main character of the game. And when I was younger, I also saw this as a reference to when Alice helped out my goat Christopher take out his bully. Speaking of, we run into Alice a bit later, and compared to the rest of the cast, she does get the short end of the stick. In their defense, because she technically doesn't play the game and the evolutions don't go past their second stage, so they have to find something for her to do because they didn't want to go into the masquerade reveal. But still, selling Bakugan at a shop seems a little cruel considering that they know they're living creatures. I don't think the Vexos ever did something like this. Maybe Alice is a bit more evil than we thought. Anyway, Alice is basically Nurse Joy in this game. We get to customize our character to make him look however we want. Yes, you're stuck with a male character. And a little bit after all this, we end up getting our own original Bakugan, Leonidas. And they hit it off really well, and the rest of the game is basically exploring their friendship as they enter the tournament to climb up the ranks. As the story progresses, Leonidas is mentioned quite often to be pretty cruel during his fights. However, Kid trusts Leonidas regardless, but the rumors do start to spread that Dan got beaten by someone who also was fighting pretty brutally. Some of the brawlers, Julie, think that this might have to be Kid and Leonidas just because rumors are also spreading about how brutal Leonidas can be in some fights. Things eventually come to light as the Bakugan Vladitor and Magmel. Murdoch. His name is Murdoch. I said Magmel, and his name is Murdoch. Moving on. His partner are revealed to us, and they are the ones who beat Drago and is selling our, well, not real name. This isn't intentional, but it's just a thing that happened, which is kind of on brand for Bakugan, now I think about it. A lot of characters do tend to jump to conclusions. Magmale and Vladitor are the rivals of Kid and Leonidas for the game, and they do a pretty good job. Basically our version of Masquerade. Speaking of, Masquerade does show up a bit later, but right before that happens, we find out that Leonidas is born in the Doom Dimension. We find this out from Vladitor. But yeah, Leonidas is from the Doom Dimension. He was born there, and this is why he's so brutal in some of his fights. However, this doesn't do anything to Kid and Leonidas's friendship. If anything, it just strengthens it because he trusts his partner. Anyway, yeah, Masquerade then shows up to flex on us because, you know, he's cool. And we climb through the ranks just a bit more until we reach the finale where we're in a 2v1 tournament, us and Dan versus Murdoch and Masquerade, and we face them off in the finals where we are able to beat them. I also want to add that the game isn't really telling the story of the show at all. It's just following our own adventures. The brawlers show up if we need to fight them throughout the tournament. The reason I mention this now is that everyone has evolved to their Bakugan, though Drago and Hydronoid don't have their final, quote, final evolutions for Season 1. Anyway, we beat Murdoch and Masquerade, and then Vladitor gets upset and takes the portion of the Silent Core for himself, and this gives him the power he needs to evolve. We're then teleported to this darkest field where we're forced to fight Vladitor, and Drago states that he trusts Leonidas, and all of the other Bakugan combine their powers and give it to Leonidas, giving him the strength he needs to evolve. Trust seems to be a running theme in this little story. Anyway, Leonidas evolves, and then we do the final battle, and I also want to add that I didn't realize this growing up, but you can make this fight noticeably a lot harder for you than it needs to be if you made Leonidas Chaos. When you get him, you can have him be any attribute you want, just like when you with your custom character. And yeah, the field has certain effects, like Darkest Bakugan will raise their power, and when Vladitor lands on the gate card, he sends this little shockwave that takes out some of your power. It's worse if you're Chaos, but I always made Leonidas Pyrus just because it was my favorite attribute, and, you know, I'm a dumb kid. I'm like, I want to be like Dan Kuso. Moving on. It's a really intense battle, but Leonidas and Vladitor seem to be dying. Murdoch is devastated, and so is the kid, but he goes over to Murdoch and tries to encourage him to keep going, despite the fact that he's not taking it well, the fact that Vladitor is gone. We get a small, and I say small, little time skip, not like a year or so, maybe like probably a few days, and it's revealed to us that Leonidas actually survived. Vladitor decided to help Leonidas, and that's why he was able to return to us. The credits then roll with the original theme song from the show, which was so dope as a kid, and yeah, that's the story. So for a while now, I was trying to find out if I really only liked this story due to nostalgia bait, or was it that well written, and honestly, I think it still holds up. In reality, it's not that much of a story. It's just you, the custom character, and your partner going through the tournament and expressing how much you two trust each other. But this is probably one of the best story arcs that Bakugan has given us, well, at least in terms of the Gen 1 Battle Brawlers era. And I know that's saying not that much, given we have, you know, Nectanium Surge and some of the other choices in the other seasons. But overall, the reason I made this video wasn't just to do the story recap, and I know it was probably boring for some of you, since, well, I don't really have footage. I also wanted to talk about the gameplay. Like I said early in the beginning of the recap, this game does a perfect job of explaining the rules of Bakugan to the point where I almost feel like this might be a definitive way for people to kind of get into it. There are some liberties they take for the sake of gameplay. They do the traditional, you select your 3 Bakugan, 3 ability cards, 3 gate cards, the battle starts, or game starts. You set your gate cards if you want to set one. Then you throw your Bakugan on to said gate card. If you miss, you lose your turn and then your opponent goes. Once 2 Bakugan are on there, the gate card opens, you play some ability cards, and then comes the battle portion. And this is where we get some mini games to try to give it the same bit of intensity that the anime has. And this part is kind of the most fun when you're playing with other people. Now, as for the things that are unique to this game that don't happen in the anime, well, I think the obvious one is rolling your Bakugan all around this unique stages to get some extra Bakugan chips to buff up your power. And then there's the other one, double stand. Double stand is basically when there are 2 Bakugan that belong to you that land on the same gate card. That's kind of it. You win the gate card automatically, and there's no battle to be had. And honestly, I always hated this rule. This game was how I found out that double stand was a thing, because it's not in the anime at all. And like I said, I did play play with my friends, but no one used this rule. I went to one Bakugan tournament, and again, no one in the tournament used this rule. I definitely understand the point of double stand, but it's just kind of boring to me in the sense of, well, the game version, the video game, as well as if this was in the show, I think it would kind of kill the momentum. A good strategy, mind you, if you're in a bad position, let's say your cards just aren't as good as your opponents, it makes sense, but it's just how I feel. Oh yeah, there's also this thing called special throw. Obviously, this is another thing exclusive to the game. Everyone just does their unique throw and doesn't have any crazy unique abilities in the show. One thing that I would probably change if I could go back in time, and let's say I was in the meetings room, I would have loved if I could have tried to see if I could convince them that, hey, we have a lot of the characters from the show. You know, if we can make this game just a bit bigger and do like a story mode for the show, like for the anime, just because you have practically all the important characters here. Yeah, you don't go past Dual Hygenoid and Delta Dragonoid, but maybe that's just me, because I remember me and my brother tried to recreate a lot of the battles that happened. We couldn't do everything because we couldn't do a 3v3, but the battles were still very fun. But yeah, overall, that's the Bakugan video game. This was one of my favorite games growing up. I still own it. I still have my PS2 as well. Surprisingly, they still work. And maybe when the time is right, I'll tackle on Defend the Core. I recently got my Wii U to work after performing surgery on it. I don't think it will make a full recovery, but it works for now. I also plan to talk about Leonidas a bit more because he's clearly the golden child of this game. But I want to know, what are your guys' thoughts on the game? Did you play it yourself, or was my terrible recap your first experience figuring out this thing even existed? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below, and I'll catch you guys next time.